13th, 2022. This is the Arlington County, Virginia Board of Equalization hearings. We have 3 cases on the agenda. The first case is RPC 1403502G at 671 North Glebe Road, and Mr. Sean Venstrom is here to represent the owner. Mr. Venstrom, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property, sir.
All right. Thank you. As most of you know, I am a partner at a boutique consulting firm focusing on regional mall. And once again, this year, we're here to talk about Ballston Quarter, which I know you're all familiar with. 363,000 square feet approximate mall adjacent to a Macy's, which anchors the mall, but is unowned and is not part of this appeal. The 2 parcels, the 22 assessment for the 2 parcels, about 91.1 million versus a board found value in 2021 of 85.5 million. Primary differences again this year are income and capitalization rate. And I think probably the easiest way to start is if you can go to page 3 of the BOE memo. Middle of the page, the county has updated the theater rent from $17.47 per square foot last year, conclusion of market value, to $22.48. While sales at the theater in 2021 ended up the year at a $23 per square foot, significant decline. The year-end 2019 sales at the theater per square foot were 73. So pre-COVID was 73 a foot. Post-COVID, we're still in 2021 at $23 per square foot, and even at $73 per square foot in 2019 at a $22 rent, the occupancy cost was at about 38%, which is unsustainable. So the $22.48 is not market rent for the theater. It's much closer to the 17, as we discussed last year. The bottom of the page, miscellaneous income increased from 87,000 to 879,000, with the majority of that being the reversal of bad debt in the expense section of the income and expense statement. So that's a significant increase, and including a reversal, an accounting reversal of bad debt to a stabilized income approach is unfortunately just not proper appraisal methodology. And then other income at the bottom of the page increased from 13,000 to 111,000. This is primarily due to specialty leasing or temporary tenants. So in a stabilized income approach, as you guys are aware, when you're concluding at market rents, market vacancy and collection, adding temporary tenant income to that is duplicative. I understand that my other handout came separately from Rosa, my analysis. So I'd like to go there next. Page 18 of my appeal narrative, bottom of the page. Just want to go over a few of these pages. I hope you've had time to review. I know the BOE handout is quite extensive. We've provided Lori and team a volume of information. They've been great to work with. We're just still at a pretty big impasse here. But at the bottom of this page, you can see the subject property metrics, the NOI 2019, 3.2 million. Again, this is unadjusted, just pure NOI. Year-end 2020, 2.9 million. Year-end 21, even while occupancy has gone up a bit, NOI still declined to $2.7 million. So as of lien date, we're looking at a decline in NOI. The following pages, page 20 is a calculation of our market rents. Page 21, I'd like to highlight a couple tenants here. The top one we talked about last year, Punchbowl Social. They went through bankruptcy at the end of 2020. They came out of bankruptcy, thankfully, for the subject property, renewed the lease in April of 2021 to a percentage rent in lieu, or essentially a percentage rent. And as you can see there, I know this is a public forum, don't want to discuss specifically what it is, but as you can see there, the sales are extremely low, and this is a material impact to the net operating income. And below that, as we've talked about in years past, the leasing team is trying to do everything possible to fill some of these cold, dark shells with tenants. And fortunately, this year they were able to secure a tenant for 23,000 square feet, a church user, unfortunately, the rent is $20 gross. So this is really where the market is heading. These are the tenants that are going to be filling up the spaces of this property. As we've talked about before, there's a lot of functional obsolescence. There's just much too much retail. And, again, 23,000 square feet to build out for a church user at a mall. It's a very atypical user, but they needed to achieve some type of tenancy within the suite. Bottom of that page, there's still tenants on rent relief, as you can imagine. They're still struggling from a post-COVID environment. Page 21, here's our conclusion of market rents. Again, we kept at the $17 per square foot of last year for the theater and the different categories of rents. Page 27, we can talk about capitalization rate. I know there's a difference here as well. Again, this is a Green Street Advisors report. Green Street Advisors provides capitalization rates for each and every shopping mall, regional shopping mall throughout the U.S. For Ballston Quarter specifically, they allocate a 10.7% capitalization rate to the property. Page 29, here's a Cushman and Wakefield mall grading matrix. Pretty wide range of capitalization rates, but you can see Ballston lands anywhere between a B- and a B+ based on a variety of different metrics, including sales per square foot in the 300 to 400 per square foot range. Page 30, some comparable sales. The appetite for this product for regional malls is slim to none. Everything that is trading is double digits. And thus we've concluded at a 10.75% capitalization rate on page 30. Page 31, cost to reach stabilization. There's still significant vacancy at the property. It's only 77% occupied. Not too much of a difference here with the county. We're at about 12 million, so not much to speak about in differences there. Page 32, at the top of that, again, is highlighting the NOI, but here's really our side-by-side direct capitalization approach from the taxpayer and the county. And we're concluding at a stabilized NOI of about $7 million. Sure hope this gets there for the client. The county's at $9.5 million, which I think, based on historic trends, this is the third year you've seen me here. I think in 3 years from now, it's still not going to be at 9.5. I really hope for the client it's going to be at 7. But I think they overshot the NOI significantly. Our capitalization rates are obviously different, as you can see, and a total concluded value for the taxpayer, 46.4 versus the 93.3 from the assessor's office. And page 33 highlights the specific line items in the miscellaneous income and other income that we talked about previously. And I'm coming up on my 8 minutes, so appreciate your time. And I ask that the board conclude at the $46.4 million. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Roskin for the county, please.
Thank you, board members. So basically, yes, we're looking at some differences here of the income and some vacancy and the capitalization rate for this particular property. Mr. Venstrom and I had numerous conversations discussing this property, and we went over the income expense statement that was submitted there, the owner's financial statement. And I had a lot of questions, and I tried to get a clarification on a lot of these things. And after a couple of discussions, the specialty tenants, that was considered kiosks. And so we're not double hitting those particular tenants, because the kiosks are not they're not applied toward, they're not part of the net leasable area. And so that was used, a lump sum adjustment was made for that. When reviewing the rent roll analysis is on page 7 of the packet. I tried to determine what would be the average rents for this particular property. And there, the route that we went was I took a look at, I broke it up: food court, restaurant, retail, your major tenants, which are the larger tenants, and the theater. And the theater is showing that what their contract rent is. Yes, I did make note that there were some concessions made for that rent, but it is a contract rent right now. But going back over the average rents for each one of those categories, what I did was I looked at, okay, I broke out in the food court who is paying percentage rent in lieu of base and who is actually paying their base rent. And so I developed the average rent based on the base rent tenants. I excluded the ones who were paying percentage rent in lieu of, because that's kind of they're still in their transitional period right now. And so that's how I developed the average rents that I used on the test page. Now the major tenants, I used the most recent rental rate. It should have been a little bit higher than what I put in the test column. I don't want to state any numbers because this is a public forum. But we did look at, I did my best to separate the percentage rent and those who are paying base rent. And if you note on the summary page, I did not, because I used the average rent and applied it to the full net leasable area, I did not include the percentage rent. If you note, when you look at column E2 and compare it to column F for the test, please note that I did not include the percentage rent because I was basing this on the base rent. Next, for the vacancy, we used a 10% vacancy rate for this, a stabilized vacancy rate. We do recognize that this mall is still in somewhat of a lease-up phase. It should have kind of gone through its lease-up phase by now, but COVID kind of put a wrinkle to that. So we're looking at this, okay, 10% stabilized vacancy, and then we gave below the line adjustments for that lease up. And you can see what they came out to is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million plus. But once again, column F is a test. And our assessment, we believe our assessment to be spot on. As for the bad debt, when we look at the bad debt, we're going, okay, this is written off. This is gone. It's an abatement. All right, they're never going to collect it again. And like I said, we went over the financial statements several times with the agent to get clarification. And I did send an email out earlier and I asked a ridiculous number of 23 questions because I needed explanation, and only the first 5 were answered. And so it required numerous conversations with them. But what I'm finished with my presentation, but I'm going to allow Chris Chikas to step in, and if he wants to contribute anything, he's welcome to do so. So I'm reserving the remaining of my time for him.
Hey, good morning, board members. Just wanted to kind of reiterate, this is something the board's seen 3 or 4 years now. Mr. Venstrom, as he explained, has been very forthcoming as far as being available to meet with Ms. Roskin and offer this information. As Lori did note, there was a little bit of confusion remaining, I guess, with some of these lines. And not to sort of use as an excuse, but I would point to obviously her compendium of work. As you can see on page 7, there's essentially a rent roll reconstruction of everything. So she's taken the time to break down the inline, the major retail. She inquired about some of the temporary tenants to figure out what was in fact a stabilized income, what was appreciable to the fact of this property went through obviously major renovations and then essentially opened into the age of COVID. You know, one thing I would also point out is this is somewhat typical of a property that we've seen commercial across the spectrum, if you will, and that when you have a property that's leasing up, you are going to have a year or two of tumultuous income. You're going to have some tenants that are coming in that are paying the low end of their base rate for their expectation of their 10-year, 12-year, whatever lease term. You're going to have less CAM recoveries and things like that. As the property ages year over year, those numbers tend to go up. Those numbers can reflect either 2 or 3% increases that come in regards to the base. There can be increases with CAM recoveries, etc. I would note too, and I believe Mr. Venstrom will back that up, the tenant that they recently signed, 20,000 some square feet for Grace Church, was actually has a provision whereby there's like essentially a kick-out clause. So if they find a more tenable tenant that can come in there and pay more market rate, they'll be able to replace them. Point out that the occupancy increased by over 10%. And I'll point out the neighborhood. You know, this is something that's literally rife with people. The Maxwell, 572, what is it? The Waycroft, 672 Flats, the Origin, J Soul. These are all new properties that are well leased, all surrounding Boston Quarter. Boston Exchange is up and running. We made a visit to the property and it looked like pre-COVID days. There's people everywhere. We do agree that we hope this all translates into stabilized income. But again, it's more of a that we want the board to reflect what they did last year and came to a value of 85 million. And this is a fairly modest increase of just about 6.6% year over year. And that's based on, again, all the success they've had in filling up that 10% increase in occupancy. So we hope you'll take that into account. Realize Lori did attempt to make a test with the new information provided and that indicated an increase. So we do recommend a confirmation of January 1. Thank you. We're available for questions.
Okay, thank you both. All right, questions from board members. Mr. Lawson. Can you turn your microphone on, sir?
I'm out of practice. This is for the county. Is the cap rate for Pentagon City Mall the same?
I'm sorry.
On the cap rate for Pentagon City Mall, is that the same as the cap rate for this mall?
No, the cap rate for what we call Fashion Center Mall is 8.05.
Okay, and then for, I guess for the county again, when this property got rezoned, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was a total redo of the mall, but it also included a residential tower. And my understanding, and you know, I wasn't intimately involved, but I did kind of keep my eye on the zoning. And the justification, I guess, for the residential tower was to help carry the mall. Does that play into your thinking at all in setting? Does that have any relevancy when it comes to establishing a value for this mall?
So we're looking at the first of all, how does the mall compare to other similar property types in the area? We're also looking at the health of the neighborhood, and that's not just one apartment building there. There are numerous apartment buildings around there. And we're also looking at connectivity. What I mean by connectivity is the metro. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How can you move around the city quite easily from this location? And yes, you can.
Okay. That's it for now, Madam Chair.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Metzger.
First one's for the department on the I&E summary. On columns D, F, and G, below the line, it's not labeled, but it's the first deduction below the line in all three of those columns. So go to D first, where you give an imputed, this is to offset the high vacancy rate, of course. And you have an imputed rent per square foot, and that's all fine. And it's close in all three. And you give the amount of square footage that needs still to be rented. And you come up with a number in D. And then it's a much lower number in your test because the square footage is less. And also the rent, imputed rent, is a little bit less. So did you find out first between calculating D and then your test F that there's less vacancy than you had originally understood?
Yes, I believe it is associated with the church.
And the church showed up on or before January 1st, 2021?
They had a contract for January 1, or as of January 1.
Okay. And then go to the same thing on G. The rents are the same, but now here's a much greater number that the appellant applies, especially relative to F, your test. Did they not get the word that the vacancy has gone down? Or I guess I should ask that question, I'm sorry, to Mr. Venstrom.
Correct.
Why is that number so much bigger, the write-off for vacancy?
I believe the difference is we performed a 3-year cost of restabilization.
Just that one number, not all the, TI and commissions and all that good stuff.
Yeah, discounted back for 3 years.
Oh, it's a discounted rate.
I don't see a square footage adjacent to that. I can pull my analysis, but I'm looking at column G. So
Yes.
we performed a 3-year cost of restabilization, as in the, let's
Whereas-
hope in 3 years it's stabilized, but that's probably
Okay.
what's driving the big difference.
Okay.
Ken?
Another question then, while you're on the hook, Mr. Venstrom.
Sure.
You had said that the income from the theater was up to $23. I guess that's a square foot. You just gave a number of $23, which was higher than last year. Less COVID, makes sense. But it's not a sustainable rate. It makes sense to me. But then you assign the value of the income to the theater back to last year's $17. What you report 23, but you say it's 17. Could you explain a little more?
Sure. So the contract rent in place is the 22.48. They've reverted back to the lease rate. And it's interesting, but the sales per square foot are also $23 per square foot. So it's doing abysmal. In 2019, it was doing $73 per square foot. So maybe I misspoke, but yeah. So our conclusion of market rent is much closer to 17 in hopes the theater comes back. But I think we could have serious debate on whether 17 is much too high.
Yeah, it just, again, you reported 23 and say the 23 is worth 17. They achieved $23 a square foot, which is neither here nor there, other than you say the number should be $17 times the square footage. I just didn't, but you've repeated it, I guess.
I'm concluding it market rent for the theater, not leased fee, a market rent approach.
I thought you said they achieved $23 a square foot. You said that twice in sales, in popcorn. No?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh,
but
okay.
I applied $17 per square foot for rent. That's the difference. Sales,
Okay.
the sales
Okay.
of
No,
the
I got
theater
it.
is about $1.5 million. They paid more in rent than they did in rent and CAM than they did in sales. The theater is doing very poorly.
Yes.
And so maybe that's
I'll
where
let mine go. I have so many notes here. I'm gonna have to go through them all. Hopefully someone
sure,
else.
maybe that's where the difference is. But yeah, the sales per square foot is equivalent to basically the rent.
Yeah, no, they're two different numbers. I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you. You did clarify it.
Okay, and then just to follow up on that, Ms. Roskin, did you have a response?
I just wanted to point out that yes, the agent is using a 3-year rent loss lease up where we're doing only 1. Okay, and so that was the difference why it looks so different. because ours is 1 based on 1 year and his is based on 3.
Okay. All right. Other questions from board members? No?
Oh,
Okay. Oh, yes, Mr. Metzger.
I'll ask one more. In the test for the department, why did the expenses go down below what they achieved in an off year 2021 and below, of course, your initial assessment in column D?
Okay,
Is that just
so
pure percentage?
no. So it's column E1 is what was filled out on the income and expense statement. Okay, and then column E2 is where we look back over the financial statement and reconstructed it. And if you'll note, the expenses at the bottom of column E2 versus column F, our test expenses are higher than what E2 is.
So E2 comes directly from what they achieved in 2021.
Yeah, from their financial statement that they attach to the income and expense.
All right, I'll let it go. Thank you.
Okay. No other questions?
No.
Okay, Ms. Roskin, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Sure, thank you. Once again, I just wanted to let you know when I developed the the average rent for these particular properties, I looked at I excluded the tenants that are still paying their percentage in lieu of. And by the way, I might add, the agent did submit a document on their percentage in lieu of, and I noted that half of the tenants that were paying percentage in lieu of base rent, that's going away. They're starting to shift back into their paying their base rent. Notice that the first half of the year they were paying that percentage in lieu of, and then the second half they're shifting back into a base rent. I'm not saying all the tenants are that way, but about half of them are shifting back into their base rent. Once again, we used a stabilized 10% vacancy rate, and then we gave below the line adjustments. And keep in mind that our below the line adjustments for the rent loss, the TIs, and the leasing commissions are based on 1 year because this is an annual assessment. And I'm just requesting that you I recommend column D, that our original assessment is correct at 91,115,700. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Venstrom, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Sure, thanks. And I do appreciate Lori and Chris's time on this property. These are extremely difficult to value. I'm trying to do this throughout the US and don't disagree. This is a great location. The issue is it's 363 plus or minus 1,000 square feet of regional mall. And yeah, when I was there in November, the restaurants, you walk down to that lower level, the food court and the restaurants are doing well, and that's probably about 50,000 square feet, but they've kind of reached the limit. You can't put restaurants in every suite on this particular property. So the challenge is, multiple, but really the challenge is it's retail. We've talked about this years past. The retailers are not expanding. They're not looking to enter into this property, especially on some of these second and third floor. There's functional obsolescence. They had to, bring in a church to fill 23,000 square feet. So there's still just some significant functional issues with this. I think if this was 150,000 square feet, it'd be a different story, but there's just too much retail GLA here. And even with the density down there, look at the theater sales, look at the sales of the inline shops. It's $350 a foot. It's not, they're barely holding on. You've got tenants coming and going through bankruptcy. A lot of structural issues here. And even as a January 1st, 2022 lien date.
I've got to ask you to wrap up because your time has expired.
Sure. Anyone valuing this would absolutely do a minimum of 3-year cost to reach stabilization. So thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board members. What's everybody think on this? I know we've seen and heard this before. So, yep, Mr. Lawson.
Yes, ma'am. I'm willing to kind of start off. I live right there and I go there all the time. That's where I do the vast majority of buying things. You go there on a pretty spring day on a Sunday afternoon, and man, that place is swamped. Buses show up and unload 100 kids at the same time. And you think, boy, things have turned around, it's thriving. But then you go there on a Thursday evening, it's dead. So, one of the reasons I asked about the Pentagon City Mall is, this is a unique, we're assessing this its own way. No other property is being assessed this way. And so my thought was, and having studied this very carefully, maybe we don't like to adjust cap rates, but maybe in this particular instance, it would be justified. And I tinkered with adjusting figures here and there and so forth and so on. And so what I did while listening to the presentation is I took the suggested cap rate 10.75, applied it to the county's assessment, ended up at 75,179. However, I think that may be too low. And so in after all this thinking I did and math I did, I kind of came to the conclusion, maybe we ought to just go with where it was last year at the 85. So that's my thinking for what it's worth, but I can get talked into something else. With that, I'll be quiet. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you, sir. Other folks? Mr. Hoffman?
I had a different rationale, but I kind of came to the same conclusion in my head that, things may be, on a course to improving from COVID, but we really haven't seen the office market in Boston, return to work. And I think the biggest headwind they have right now is that, like Barnes said, that Thursday traffic, where usually that would be a bunch of full office buildings. And right now it's probably 30% of people actually at their desks going out to lunch and going shopping on their breaks and all that. So I think our rationale was good last year. I think we increased the lease up allowance and came to that 85 million number. And I would support holding it flat for the year.
Okay. All right, other folks? Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, I think we're just trying to find a justification to lower the value, but looking at the numbers that Ms. Raskin worked on, these are real numbers. This is something that, that's what we would have done anyway, to look at averages on rents and expenses. I don't see, why we have to make an adjustment if there's not one needed. I don't see how, I think Ms. Raskin did a very good job in this case. There's a lot of information. It's a unique property. It's a unique way to assess it. But even at, looking at the columns E1 or E2, even if we look at those numbers and allow for the vacancy that the appellant is asking for, the 20%, then, the adjustments below the line wouldn't be justified. So if we do that, even the value would be higher than what the county has. So I think the below the line adjustments are the proper way to do it. But I looked at the numbers, I looked at all the averages, and I don't see how we can adjust. Just to, try to find a way to lower it. I don't think it's
Okay. All right, Mr. Yates?
After hearing the discussions, a lot of my questions went away. And I think the county did a great job. The one area I do look at, though, is the lease up period. The 1 year versus 3 years. That's where I have some concern. I don't think that it's a 1 year turnaround.
Yeah. Mr. Lawson, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know we don't ask each other questions, but I guess I would say assume, and by the way, Lori did do a good job as always, and I compliment her on her great work. But assuming all the figures are accurate and good, don't you think the cap rate's out of whack?
It's the highest cap rate we've ever seen.
The cap rate's wrong.
Mr. Metzger.
Thank you. I was going to address that third, but I'll do it first. It's the highest cap rate I've ever seen all the years I've been here, and it's a quality building, and it's suffering alternately from COVID and from the rise of e-tail. One of these days, we're going to have to decide which one it is. COVID's probably a little bit more temporary than the rise and continued expansion of e-tail. So if it's the former, next year maybe things will turn out okay in the owner's direction. If not, then as we had in the appellant's write-up, this kind of property is nearing obsolescence, other than for personal services and food. So far, even though this is the third year in a row, so far below the line deduction seems okay because we're in flux. But soon we're gonna have to make a decision. Is this, or the department will, is this not a trend, but the new reality? And next year, given that we still have the tail end of COVID, maybe next year would be the time to do it. On cap rate, again, it's a quality neighborhood, a quality building, quality landlord. It's as high as I've ever seen, ever. And we get old decrepit buildings around the county that have lower cap rates than this, so I couldn't possibly justify it. Finally, I thought Jose's comment, and I'll just say it a little differently, that we're looking for a reason to make it the same as last year. Last year, clearly for this property was worse than this year by all measures. Objective running numbers, plus just we know that things aren't as dire. Is the place booming? No, but it's clearly not the same as last year. It's better. So my bottom line is that the lower of the two assessments by the department is what I would favor.
So just so that I understand, because I heard two different things, you would support going back to 2021.
No, I said the opposite. I think there's no reason to believe that this is performing at the same rate for 2022 as it was for 2021.
Right, but you said you support the lower one, so the lower one.
Meaning column D, that was a little confusing.
Oh, okay.
I mean, D versus F. I'm saying whichever one's lower, which is D, is the one that I support.
Okay, Mr. Yates, you.
Ken, would you, but the lease up is where I think the issue is. It's
Right.
just not going to hit that lease up in 1 year.
But that, sure, I'm sorry, I didn't comment on that. We've heard that as appellants' positions many times. And the response is what Lori already mentioned, we do this year by year. We don't assume 3 years from now on lease ups or any other item. It's always year by year. And again, if COVID went away tomorrow, this lease up would it would be at 90-something% by December 31st.
Right, and we would reassess that. Right.
And next year would be different. Yeah,
Right.
we never do anything multiple years. Again, we hear it all the time, and I'm sympathetic, but it's year by year.
Yeah, I would myself, I think it's a unique property, a unique situation. I think it still is being impacted by both reasons, the e-tail and the COVID. I mean, I would tend to agree with Mr. Lawson and Mr. Hoffman. I just don't see it going up to 91 million.
Either. I don't either.
And so, I mean, if somebody had a different analysis and came up with a number somewhere in between, I would support it. But without that, I don't see where it's any higher than the previous year. So
That's where I was looking to adjust even that little bit in the lease up period. That I realize, yes, we look at 1 year, but we also we look at all the guidelines.
right.
We're talking about breaking for this property what we think is a little more realistic is a guideline.
All right. Well, then just to move this along, would you support the 2021 if there was a motion?
Yes.
Mary, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
If an adjustment would need to be made, being a unique property, then you know, I think what Barnes suggested, maybe making an adjustment because it is the only property with that cap rate,
Mhm.
making an adjustment on the cap rate to, and I did one on 9.5. That brings the value, even with the below the line deductions, to 86,744,000 even, which is a little bit higher than last year, but you know, I think in order to either compromise or make an adjustment based on the uniqueness of the property, maybe that would be one way to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, I could support that. I mean, because as we said, I think it's somewhere in between the two, but go ahead, Mr. Yates.
Yeah, I could support that too, because I just don't see it going up.
Right.
And that's where the problem lies. But I'm not sure last year is the right number either. I
Right?
think it's,
Right. Mr. Hoffman.
That sounds good. And I know I haven't said a lot on this, but just one final comment. $46,400,000. Come in with something more reasonable, and there might be a further reduction, but we can't even talk about that number. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's below what the county paid for the infrastructure improvements to be able to start this project. So.
Okay. All right. So just to clarify, Mr. Penaranda, so you adjusted the cap rate to 9.5 and
On
kept
the original
everything
assessment.
else the same off of which column, the original or?
Column D, the original.
Okay. And you got 86,744 even.
Yes.
All right. Would somebody like to make a motion then?
I'll go ahead and move then that we reduce the assessment to 86,744,000 based on increasing the cap rate to 9.5.
I'll second.
Okay. A motion and a second by Mr. Yates. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The assessment's reduced to 86,744,000 even. And that's based on adjusting the cap rate on column D to 9.5.
That's a good number.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay. We have Ms. Roskin, and then I believe we have Ms. Borman, and Mr. Harmon is going to present for the firm.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, there we go. Okay, moving along to the next case is RPC 1001303G, and it's the property located on Washington Boulevard. Hold up, I don't have the exact. Okay, and then so Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yes, thank you. Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, good morning. I hope everyone had a restful break. My name, as you mentioned, is Jordan Harmon, and I'm an attorney at the law firm Wilkes Artis Chartered. I'm appearing on behalf of the owner and taxpayer of this property. This property is the Westover Shopping Center located on Washington Boulevard in the Westover neighborhood. It consists of the Wells Fargo Bank, the Walgreens, the post office, the Westover Market, and the small shops in between those establishments. It also consists of about 2/3 of the parking in the rear of the building. This last item is important. Why only 2/3 of the parking in the rear of the building? This economic unit does not include parcel 10027,007, which contains the middle third of that rear parking. That parcel is separately assessed. However, all of those rear parking spaces, including those on the parcel ending in 7, are both used for and necessary for the income generation at the shopping center. The Arlington County zoning ordinance requires 1 parking space for every 250 square feet of floor area on the first floor of a building. In this case, that equals 175 parking spaces. The retail property would not be able to operate at its current capacity without the parking spaces contained on the parcel ending in 7. If you turn your attention to page 5 of the appeal, you can see in the appellant's pro forma on column F that we have made a deduction to account for the separately assessed value of this portion of the parking lot. Now, to help understand the context of this portion of the parking lot, the Arlington County GIS map accessed via the county's tax page provides a clear view, which I'd be happy to share if necessary. On the county's GIS map, you will see that most of the rear parking is assessed on the parcel ending in 13 and consists of the outsides of the parking lot. If you look on the GIS map, this portion of the parking lot looks like a gerrymandered congressional district that loops around the parking contained on parcel 7. This outer portion of the parking lot is assessed based on the income generating ability of the shopping center. Essentially, the county acknowledges that this outer 2/3 of the parking lot is a required element of the larger economic unit and is necessary to generate rental income from the retail tenants. This makes sense. However, when it comes to the middle third of this rear parking lot, those spaces on the parcel ending in 7, the county chose to assess the parcel as a separate entity, even though the parcel has no value outside of allowing the shopping center to operate as a retail center. This portion of the parking is clearly in the middle of the rear parking lot as the GIS map shows, and a site visit this week proved that these spaces are both designated for and used by customers, employees, and vendors of the shopping center tenants. A portion of this lot is also used as excess space for the hardware store. Several of the businesses even have rear entrances that open onto this portion of the parking lot. If any of you have driven by this shopping center, which I'm sure you have, you know that Washington Boulevard at this portion is extremely busy. There's very limited off-street parking right on Washington Boulevard. This rear parking lot's essential for these businesses, and this center part, the parcel 7, is a part of that parking lot. Since the value of the middle third of the parking lot is derived from its ability to generate the income at the shopping center, yet it is assessed separately, the county has double counted the value of this portion of the parking lot, and a deduction is necessary. Again, you see that we have made this deduction below the line on column F on the county's test page. Next, the 2022 assessment represents a 6% increase over the 2021 assessment. This is despite actual gross potential income decreasing and operating expenses increasing from 2020 to 2021. As such, the assessment overstates the gross potential income and understates the operating expenses required to operate this property, which was initially built in the late 1930s. The 2022 assessment assumes gross potential income that is $97,000 higher than what was actually achieved in 2021 and over $91,000 higher than the stabilized potential. The assessment also assumes operating expenses of only $3.62 per square foot versus the actual 2021 operating expenses of $5.61 per square foot. Based on these two assumptions, the assessment arrives at a value in excess of the potential of the property. If you direct your attention to column F on the county's test page, you'll see that the stabilized potential of the property is much lower than the assessment. Column F is created by using the actual rents in place as of the date of value, actual 2021 pass-through income, the county's uniform vacancy and collection rate of 16%, and the actual 2021 operating expenses grown by 5% to account for the record inflation of both goods and services. Both the 2021 actual and stabilized NOIs are both well below the assessment. Now, the 4-year operating history reported on columns A, B, C, and E of the county's test page. Those columns do not stabilize the vacancy at the property in a uniform manner. If we apply the county's uniform vacancy and collection rate of 16%, the stabilized values listed on page 72 are what we get. For 2019, the stabilized value is $810,600 based on actual reported income and expenses stabilized at 16% vacancy. That figure for 2020 is $1,184,000. And for 2021, $1,099,600. This is in accordance with the county's uniform methodology and is appropriate at the property, especially given the fact that as of the date of value, 2 of the largest tenants had lease end dates quickly approaching. To summarize, the assessment separately assessed the parking lot on parcel 7, when in fact that parcel is the center of the rear parking lot. This parking lot is both used by and required for the retail shops. Again, if you've been by this shopping center, which I'm sure everybody has, that parking is a mess there. And This lot is clearly designated for use of the Westover Shopping Center. As such, the parcel ending in 7 is double assessed and a deduction is necessary. The assessment also, again, overstates potential income and understates operating expenses, both of which results in the assessment overvaluing the property. I want to emphasize again, this property was initially built in the 1930s. It's an old building. It's got a flat roof. It's got issues that recur year to year. The 2021 operating expenses are above the 2020 reported, but that's largely because 2020, we saw the COVID mandatory shutdowns. We saw limited retail. We saw limited use. If you look at the 2019 expenses, the last year pre-COVID, those expenses are very close to what we saw in 2021. 2021 expenses are the best indication of what we can expect expenses to be at going forward. If we correct for these errors, meaning the parking lot not being included, the income being overstated, and the operating expenses being understated, the taxpayer respectfully requests a reduction to $14,358,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Roskin for the county, please.
Thank you, board members. Okay, for this particular property, we do. I have visited this site a number of times. I've driven around it, and yes, I understand the parking out there. That they need this parking, and so one of the questions I did ask them early on is if they had a letter of determination about whether or not this parking is required. And I believe that we determined that this is a grandfathered in, and to say that this particular property has no value outside of this shopping center is incorrect. It is zoned R6, and so it could have if you were to close off the parking, you could put a house in there. But it is being used for parking for this particular shopping center, so we recognize that. Now, when you look at, when I looked over the rent roll, there's absolutely no vacancy being reported, so great for them. They're keeping all of their tenants in place, which is wonderful. When you take a look at, yes, our expenses are lower than what they're reporting, but at the bottom line there, take a look at our NOI. It's less than what they're reporting. And I did ask the agent during our discussion why they did not appeal the particular parcel ending in 007. That is that vacant lot. And I believe the response was something about the owner maybe neglected to include it or what. I'm not sure why, but I did ask, and that's all I have for now. I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you both.
Actually,
Questions from board members?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Never mind.
Okay, questions from board members? Mr. Yates.
Lori, if you make the statement that they could use this parcel in the middle of the 007 for residential, would that leave enough legal parking for the shopping center?
Well, once again, I was trying to find that out, and there is no letter of determination as to stating how many parking spaces are required for this shopping center. It has been grandfathered in. It was built in the 1930s, and I did ask them that in the email. Do you have a letter of determination from the zoning department that states how many parking spaces are required for this particular property? And they were not able to produce anything like that. And I even contacted the zoning department myself. They don't have a letter of determination on file.
Okay, under current zoning requirements, which would change, if that parcel left, it would change the whole thing. But under current zoning requirements, would they have enough to operate that shopping center?
And probably not, no. But it has been grandfathered in, and we have lots of properties that have been grandfathered in throughout the county.
And it does fill up too.
And
Yeah.
Mark, if I may, Madam Chairwoman, may I follow up with that?
Mr. Yates?
Yeah, please.
I just want to reiterate, and that's one thing I'm not sure that was conveyed by the appellants or by the county. Both 006 and in fact 007 is also part of this, are owned by the same entity that owns Westover Shopping Center. So we would point out that it's actually upon them to have this zoning changed. They know that this is a residentially zoned property. They know that it's being used as a parking lot. So it's really incumbent upon the owner to address that situation. This is being correctly valued by the residential team as it's an R6. It's a residential property, as is property 10-027006, which also uses some of its property to use and enforce the parking lot. So we just want to reiterate that they're not being double counted. They're not part of this economic unit for Westover. They're residential properties valued by the residential team. It is incumbent upon the owner, which again is shared ownership of Westover Shopping Center, to change that zone.
All right, Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I have a quick question, and then I can address the discussion that was just held. There was a really bad flood, what, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, something like that. Did that impact the value at all? And I guess I'll ask both the county and the owner, because I know that there's tremendous damage in the basement for some of these tenants.
Yes, Mr. Lawson, there was a lot of water damage that was incurred at these properties.
Has that impacted the value, you believe? In other words, any tenant in the future that's going to lease there might have in the back of their mind, well, next time we have a big rain, we could lose everything in the basement. Has it impacted rents at all or anything of that nature?
So most of the leases, there is not any recent leasing activity, so we have not seen that show up. And I'm not aware of any current tenants asking for some sort of an abatement in anticipation of future water-related events. I do know that the water events in the past history have impacted expenses and are likely to, as you said, continue to have an impact in that area. While I don't have any data as to how it's affected potential rents, but it very well may.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
Mr.
Metzger?
Lawson,
Mr. Cheekas, please go ahead.
just was going to point out per the pro forma page 4, you can see that retail rents increased 4 years in a row.
Okay, Mr. Metzger?
My question's back to the parking lot. Is this R6 parking lot, is that owned by the appellant or some other entity who gets the tax bill for it?
It's owned by the appellant.
It's owned by the
County
appellant.
records.
Okay, so the question for the appellant is, why do you think it's double counted such that it ought to be taken off below the line? I must have missed something.
Yes, and I'd be happy to discuss that. It's the value of that property is not as a vacant residential land. The value of that property is as an integral part of this parking lot. If you pull up the GIS map, you'll see that this is the middle of the parking lot. Nobody's going to build a house in the middle of the parking lot behind Westover Shopping Center. That's the value is used to generate the income from the retail tenants.
So you're saying, excuse me, you're saying it should be taxed as a parking lot and not as a potential house with our zoning. Okay, am I right?
Correct, yes, sir.
Terrific.
It should be a part of the economic unit.
Good, thank you.
Okay, any final questions?
If I can just add, Mr. Maskin, we are not challenging the value of that lot or how it's valued. What we are saying is that the income generated by the center is generated in part by that lot. So to capitalize the value of the shopping center without accounting for the value of that lot results in double counting. You could not rent this center without having parking. And so it's part of the overall economic unit We don't care how it's valued. We just care that it be deducted from the overall value of the economic unit because it is part of the economic unit.
It's part of the economic unit, so you want to take it out of the value. I'm lost.
That's correct. So you know how when you look at an office building and it may have 4 parcels, you take that office building, you capitalize the value, let's say it's $100 million, and each of the 4 parcels are the exact same. Each parcel would be valued at $25 million. You wouldn't say, okay, well, the office building sits only on one of those parcels, even though all of those parcels were needed to generate the income and add additional value. You would base the value, the total value, on the capitalized value of the property. And that's what we're asking you to do here.
The whole economic unit. Yeah.
Correct. But it doesn't matter to us if it's assessed as R6, it still is part of the economic unit, and that value should be deducted from the capitalized value. In other words, if you assess it as residential and you assess the income it generates as part of the shopping center, you are double valuing it. Because otherwise you'd need to reduce the shopping center income to such an extent to reflect a shopping center that had no parking.
So that is double, you're alleging double counting. And
Correct.
Ms. Roskin, what's your response to that? Or Mr. Chief?
So we think that it's part of the economic unit. However, like I said, I asked them why they did not appeal that particular RPC, and they never appealed that RPC this year.
We're not appealing the value of the
Okay,
RPC.
hold on.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here, please. All right, Ms. Ruskin, just because they didn't appeal it, if you know that it should be deducted and it's incorrect, then it doesn't matter whether they appealed it.
It's being valued. They did not include it. We could not address it.
Okay, well, let me put it a different way then. Regardless of whether it's appealed, do you believe that it's being counted twice?
If you add it into, if you include it in the economic unit, it will change the values. It will change the values of the other parcels.
Okay. So
because of allocation.
Right. Okay. So are we all in agreement that it is part of the economic unit, whether it's not included in this appeal or not? I guess it's just a question for the county.
Yeah, so the problem we have is that, again, it's very theoretical. We agree that, yes, in theory, economic unit theory is that you need parking spaces to support this shopping center. But
Right.
we also take issue with the fact that the shopping center is also owned by the owner of this parcel that has known that it's been used for residential purposes, illegally zoned, and has been using it for this purpose. We also would point out that, again, that RPC 006 has an actual physical house on that property and is being valued by the residential team, and also has a portion of its properties used as the parking lot. This is also owned by the Rucker Company. So what we would recommend is that the Rucker Company take the time to make the changes through the legal process, differentiate that this is not a residential zone site, that they want this to be used for the purpose that it's used for, which is for the commercial property parking lot, and then we can add it to the economic unit. How they're going to address the single family house that, again, has half of its backyard as a parking lot, I don't know. They'll have to have that rezoned, which is probably part of my thinking is why they're not doing this, because of the costs that are going to be incurred with getting land records being altered. So I think it should be done legally before we just assume that it's, yes, it's being used as a parking lot. Theoretically, we all agree. Legally, it's a single family zoned house that's being vacant.
Let me ask then the appellant, why don't you just do that?
This site is grandfathered. The use is legal. The parking.
Nobody's questioning that it's legal. I'm just saying, just to make it tidy and to put it all in the economic unit, why don't we just clean this up and do it?
Barnes, maybe you can help. I don't see a reason to do that because it is, to me, that's taking, it seems like taking unnecessary legal steps. We haven't challenged the value of the residential lot. the quote unquote residential lot. We just say it's part of the economic unit and therefore should be deducted.
Okay.
I
All right. Okay,
don't see it.
you're repeating yourself. I get where you are on that. Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I was going to wait till discussion, but I can explain what's going on if you would like for me to do it now.
Sure.
Okay, here's what's going on. The back of this parking lot is grandfathered. It's been there forever. You haven't had any tenant turnover in a long time, so the county would not require a parking tab. If you were to, zone it or go in for a use permit, you have to bring it up to today's code, which would most likely be impossible. Now, the proof that this area is used and required parking for the shopping center is contained in the use permit that the post office obtained. And when you read the staff report, you'll see that they calculated the required parking utilizing the whole rear parking lot as well as the parking spaces on Washington Boulevard. The parking spaces along Washington Boulevard are partially county right-of-way, partially owned by the Ruckers. And so to get a determination would be a pointless act. You already have a county acknowledgement that it's required parking due to the use permit for the post office. And so with that, I'll be quiet because that's the explanation of what's going on here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Yates, did you have a question?
No.
No? Okay.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Matzkin?
I do have a question. It's maybe the same question. The owner, the Ruckers of this R6 zone property, they're getting a bill for that, right? A tax bill. Okay, great. And these three RPC numbers that I have in the work that was prepared for us by the department, that parcel is not here. It's not a part of it. These three RPC numbers are the entire economic unit as legally constructed by the department. And Mr. Chikas is saying, yes, it's these three and only three. So there's one bill for the fourth one, the R6, mostly parking lot, and this economic unit. So I don't see the double counting. There's one bill for one RPC and another bill for three RPCs as an economic unit. That functionally you're using the fourth one as part of the economic unit. God bless, it's grandfathered, but it's not redundant, it seems to me. If you have a response to that, I'd like to hear it. If not, we'll move on.
Yes, I do have a response to that. If you look at the parcel ending in 10, if you pull this up on the county's GIS map, this is actually just a road, an access road that cuts between the parking lot and the rear of the building.
Yeah.
This is also similar to the parking lot. That road has no value on its own, absent the value that it contributes to these buildings. The same is of this middle third of the parking lot. It has no value other than what it contributes to the retail shops.
Sure.
The value, but yet it's being taxed separately. So just as the access road is looped
separately as an R6 property, excuse me, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, great.
Separately, and we make a deduction below the line. And along those lines, the county also, Mr. Chikas introduced parcel 006, which had not been addressed at anywhere in the appeal, but he discussed it, and so I'd like to address it as well. Parcel 006 also makes up a part of this rear parking lot, but it's not making up as much of, that parcel is not contributing as much of its space. It does have a residential house on it, but about half of the lot, if you look on the GIS map, is the parking lot. So rightfully, that should be deducted as well. You may want to address it this year and deduct half of the property value would probably be fair, half of the land value, I'm sorry. If not, I'm sure that'll be on appeal next year. But since the county did bring that to the board's attention, I would like to address that. That is also contributing to the income of the retail property. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, Ms. Roskin, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Sure. Okay, maybe I was not being clear, but first of all, I just wanted to note that they did not appeal that particular parcel, so no change or anything could be made to that parcel. However, if it was brought into the economic unit, the value would still be the same for the overall economic unit. However, it would reallocate the values, that total value would be reallocated across 4 parcels, not just 3. So that would mean some of the other parcels would be reduced, okay, based on allocation. All right. But getting back to the value of the property, I'm just asking you to confirm column D's NOI, which is showing less than what's being reported for the 2021. And hopefully I explained the allocation for that economic unit and if you included that other parcel. Chris, did you want to?
Yeah, we'll just quickly point out the increase in effective gross as mentioned, I'm sorry, the increase in operating expenses mentioned by the appellants, but there was no mention of the 100,000+ gap in our effective gross. Again, this is a property that's highly occupied, in fact, no vacancy, yet we still applied the guidelines. This led to an under-projected effective gross. You've seen this before with a lot of other properties.
I gotta
If we
wrap
make
you up.
adjustments to
Minute is
the
up.
operating expenses, then we'd ask you to
Mr.
make
Cheekas.
adjustments to the effective gross. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. So from our discussion, it appears that we're all in agreement that this parcel 7 is being used as parking for the economic unit. The county's contention is that it's correctly addressed by appealing the residential portion. I think that there's 2 ways to address this. We can address it the way we've chosen to, or you can appeal the residential portion. It's 2 ways of getting to the same result. Because we chose one, they argue that the other is appropriate. This parking lot is part of the economic generating ability of this shopping center. Now, going to the stabilized potential, the county mentions effective gross income. Effective gross income in the county's test deducts 16% uniform vacancy and collection. They compare that to a fully leased property without deducting any vacancy and collection. That's not uniform. If we deduct 16% uniform vacancy and collection from open year column E 2021, that drops us below the county's assessment. If you look at the prior years, the operating expenses in 2018 were 16.7%, $252,221. 2019, $233,028. Obviously, they dropped significantly in 2020. That was largely a result of COVID shuttering retail establishments. 2021, stores are open again. Expenses go back up, $234,618. That's just over $1,000 difference from 2019. Expenses have been pretty consistent throughout the past 4 years, with the exception of the COVID impacted 2020. As such, we believe that the test column, the value shown in column F, the appellant's pro forma, should be adopted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board members. Okay, Mr. Matzkin.
2 things. One, I agree fully with the appellant. The expenses in column D are much too low. 2020 was an aberration, and I would accept the operating year expenses in column E. It's about, and therefore I come out with a lower assessment. I would up those expenses, and I can give you final numbers if you wish. Second, this parking lot canard, I mean, it's being charged once, fortunately to the same owner, just in a different bill. I don't get at all that they're arguing it ought to be in the economic unit. I don't get that they should appeal it in order to get relief, but I don't think there's any relief to be had. It's on, the value of it's on one bill and not another, and that's the end of it. So that's my contribution.
Okay, Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I mean, that lot can't be used for anything, Ken, except for parking for the shopping center. And you can't pull either a building permit for a single family house, because you would thrust the post office use permit into a violation. And if the post office became something else, you could not pull a CO for any tenant space without demonstrating that the entire center has enough parking. And so it's just factually erroneous to claim that that's not part of the required parking for the shopping center. I mean, it is. And
But
so
they're not paying for it. I mean, they're not paying for it in this bill, this economic unit. They're paying for it in a different tax bill.
Yeah, but
Same,
if it
same.
went into the economic unit, would the assessed value of the economic unit go up? And the answer is no, because it's based on income.
So they would get relief for paying for that square
So they're
footage
being
of
double
paid
whammy
land.
with the whatever it is, 602. They're paying twice. Now, you just made a suggestion. I don't know how the math works out, but I think, I don't know if we can fix it this year, but next year they have to put this lot into the economic unit. And I'm sure the ownership can provide evidence or get the zoning office or somebody to tell them, no, this is required. You can't put a house there and put a fence up and then end up in the parking. I mean, that's just
You're
actually wrong.
Barnes, so your point is, if this were maybe subdivided, that parcel, the two parcels, 06 and 07, as part of the economic unit, the value of this property, this economic unit would not go up, but the balance, which remains R6, the tax on that would go down. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is this is part of the economic unit, period. And if it's part of the economic unit, it doesn't get its own bill. So therefore, whatever.
But it wouldn't add to this bill.
Yes.
It would just,
Yeah.
because we're not doing square footage of parking space, we're doing
Correct.
only income. Okay, now I do get it. Thank you for explaining. So
Thank
that
you.
seems to be on the appellant. I would take your sage advice if I were the appellant. Okay.
And so just to follow up on that, Mr. Lawson, so what you're saying is then the 6027 should be deducted off?
Yes, ma'am.
That's okay. All right. Mr. Yates.
Wow, I didn't expect that answer from.
Okay. I cut to the chase.
I'm going to, where Ken, you were, I agree with the expenses. That's the one I would have focused on more. Although I raised the parking issue initially too. But I think the expenses are wrong. And I did, Ken, your suggestion, moving the operating year of 2021 over expenses would work.
Okay, Mr. Panoranda.
Mary, maybe you can help me with the math. I'm not sure. I should have asked Lori in this one, because I'm looking at column D, and I think the gray areas are the base rent, if I'm not mistaken. So I redid the math. If I add those two amounts, 863,945 plus 395,560, I come up with 1,259,505. And if we take 15% of that for the expenses, the number is higher. So I'm not sure if that number is incorrect there. The number I come up with is 188,926. If I take 15% of that number, but the number that is showing there is 158,698. So
She included the pass-through rent in that?
No, the pass-through is not included in that.
No, I'm saying that you think she did.
No, because it would have been higher.
Even higher.
Yeah. So just making that correction would lower the value to 60,952,400. But that's my understanding. If there's a mistake there in that number, then that should be corrected. But am I right, or?
Okay, I was doing math because we're talking about 3 different topics here now, and I was back on the other one. So can you just repeat again what?
Looking at column D,
Uh-huh.
the gray areas I understand are the base rent on the top.
Mm-hmm.
So if I add those two numbers, the amount would be 1,259,000. If I take 15% of that for the expenses, like it's showing there, it wouldn't be 158,698. It would be 188,926.
Okay, which 2 numbers? I'm sorry, I'm totally not following you.
Look at column D.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
the gray
okay.
areas.
Yeah,
I'm not including
the
pass-throughs.
2 in the gray area.
Right.
Okay, you said 1,259,505,
Right.
and then you're taking expenses of what?
15% what's showing there.
So that is, you are correct, 188,926.
Right.
What's your bottom line, Jose?
The bottom line would be 16,952,400.
But 188's a lot better than
Okay, so
not enough.
that's correcting the, okay, we got so many things here. Okay, so correcting the expenses would get us to 16,952,400, correct?
Right. Okay,
so that's one issue. Then the other issue, which is Mr. Lawson's issue, is reducing it by 602,700.
I don't agree to reduce that.
I know, but I need to get it out on the table of where people are.
Okay.
Mr. Lawson?
I think that, I think it should go there. However, if the votes aren't there, I think there should be a reduction either based on expenses or as Jose suggested. I think next year the ownership is going to roll up their sleeves and get this corrected as far as the economic unit. And so if that's not what the majority wants to do, I do think there should be a reduction of whatever we can get.
Yeah, I think it should be rezoned to do that. I think, that's my opinion.
It can't be, Jose, because you have to amend the GLUP. You got to bring it up to code. It's impossible. That's been looked into by the ownership.
Right, and if we know that it's being taxed on both sides, I mean, then we know that it's incorrect. So, okay, so just so that I believe I understand. So going to Mr. Penoranda's issue of correcting the expenses, that would get us to a corrected value of 16,952,400. Then the further reduction of, if people are in agreement to remove parcel 10,027,007, brings it down to 16,349,700. So I believe, unless somebody corrects me, that those are the 2 options on the table that everybody's.
Expenses as well. Increasing expenses is a third option.
Yes, I think the expenses need increased. I don't think 188 is where they should be.
All right, what do you suggest that they are?
I would pull over the column E expense number.
Is that the flood fixing?
No, because look at
No.
2019 and 18, it's very consistent. When they're operating fully, that's about the level in dollars that they were spending.
Mm-hmm. I would kind of go where Mary suggested, to the 16,349, but I don't know if there's a majority to go there.
Well, hold on one second. So I just want to get what this percentage is, 395. Okay, so if you pulled, it's only 16%. Do I have that right, Jose? If you used the column, I can, from the
Expense number.
test.
If you use the expenses on column E instead of what the department has, I come up with, let me see, a final value of 16,326,500.
That's
Which is
what
a-
I have without the
Right.
first.
16
Without-
million, what is it?
16,326,500, and that's not including the parcel.
Right.
So
Nor is it including the change you made to vacancy and collection. The
Right.
math error that apparently the department made. And both of them should be included in the total value.
Okay, well, you got to come up with a number, Ken. You're kind of just going, oh, and add this one in there and add this
Oh,
one in
no,
there.
no, no,
You know.
no, I thought you had already had the math from the error in the vacancy and collection. And I'm saying from that number, I would then deduct the math of increasing the expenses, which means deducting the number again from the correction of
Well,
vacancy.
again, it's easy to
to
sit
a-
there and just say it's what it should do. Run some numbers and walk us
Okay,
through.
so what is your number again? Jose, 16 what?
I
Making,
mean, if we do what Mark is suggesting, just using the expenses from column E on the original assessment, then the final value would be 16,326,500.
And is that are you using then the correction that you did? Oh, no, there wouldn't be
No.
a correction.
No, there would be a
Right,
correction.
you're right. There you go.
there wouldn't be a correction for vacancy? Finish
No,
your
that-
sentence,
Was it,
Mary.
there was never a vacancy issue. It was always, what he did was the total operating expenses.
There was a correction on the expenses, not on vacancy.
Oh,
So that's what, okay, so we're talking,
I missed that.
It's
okay,
But
Center
if you,
forward,
but if
please.
you feel the other parcel should be deducted, then, doing the other way, correcting the expenses to the 15% what the county has, and then deducting the value would be a bit higher than the 16,326.
right. So by my math, what I see here is you have two options. Either you can take just the correction to the original operating expenses that Mr. Penaranda had and reduce for the 602,700, and it comes up to, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Penaranda, 16,349,700.
Correct.
Or you could just go with taking the column E expenses, and it's going to get it to 16,326,500.
Right.
Which might be a little cleaner, and then that gives them the time to go figure out about this 007 parcel for next year moving forward.
And an incentive to do so. To go clean it up.
Right. Is everybody in agreement with that? Okay.
I think
Would somebody like to make a motion?
Greg has a
State it
comment.
properly.
I think Greg has a comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Hoffman.
Only comment is they're both around the same number, so
Right.
I'm okay with it. My position is if you're not taking the 602,000 out, it is double taxation. The income from the shopping center is derived from the parking on the parcel that ends in 007. And so if you take away that parking, the income goes away with it. Not to mention they get sued by all their tenants, and anybody that's month to month gets to walk away. You don't want to be sued by the United States Post Office because you took away the parking for their facility.
Right.
So if you're going to value this property at 16 million or 17 million based on the income approach, you have to assume that that income goes away if you take out the parcel with the parking on it. So it's double taxation. I would prefer to include use the methodology that Jose has with the 602,000 deduction, because that acknowledges the double taxation issue, but I can go either way.
Right, and I'll be honest with you, I agree with you. However, it's a lower value,
So
which is the only reason that, if it makes it cleaner and tidier, but I still think you
I can
probably
go
need
either
to
way.
go get this fixed. Yeah. Okay.
Are you suggesting it's either adjusting for expenses or the double counting of the parcel, not both?
Well, Jose's got both. He's just got a different methodology to get there so that we have a consensus.
Right.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Penaranda.
Well,
I don't know
I'll go
which
ahead-
one you're going to do, but put one up.
I'll go ahead and move that we make the reduction by increasing the expenses to what Mr. Yates suggested to last year, to the operating number. So the final value would be 16,326,500.
Okay, do I have a second?
Aye.
Mr. Yates. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so it's 6-0, it's unanimous. The assessment's reduced to 16,326,500. It's based on using the actual expenses from column E. And that's it. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Have a good day.
Okay. All right, I've been asked by board member to take a break, so it is 10:31. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and finish up the last case. If everybody can turn off their microphones and their cameras, that would be great. Thank you. All right, who do we got here? I see Mr. Hoffman. Is Mr. Steinhauser on?
No, it's Leo Coet.
Okay. All right, let's look at a couple more.
Nice to see everyone. This is my first of the year, I believe.
Yeah.
Morning.
Okay, we need Mr. Penaranda and Mr. Lawson.
Mary,
I'm here.
Mary, just to clarify this last case, it was 16,326,500, right?
16,326,500, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Mr. Lawson. Do we have Mr. Penaranda? All right, we'll give him another minute.
Mary,
Yes.
on the first case, Boston Quarter, what was the vote count?
6-0, unanimous.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Rosa, has Mr. Penaranda been knocked off by any chance?
No, he's still logged on.
All right, if he's not back at 10:39, we're going to go without him, since we have a quorum. Oh, there he is. Okay. All right, we've got everybody back, so we will move to the final case on the agenda, which is RPC 32002001. The property is located at 2508 Columbia Pike. It's Arlington Village Retail. And Mr. Coet is going to speak on behalf of the owner. So you can start and tell us about your property. You have 8 minutes, sir.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. So as you mentioned before, the subject property is Arlington Village. It's a small, about 19,000, 20,000 square foot strip retail center on Columbia Pike. And ultimately, I'll try to keep it below the 8 minutes and much shorter than the earlier ones. It's a pretty straightforward case. Ultimately, if turning to page 3 of 34 in our analysis, you'll see just the basic workup, our opinion of value in the leftmost column, actuals in Arlington County approach in the right. We have used the rent roll to derive actual projected calendar year 2022 potential gross income and other income per the rent roll provided when submitted to the county. We then apply a 16% vacancy and collection loss to both the other income and the gross potential income for just the base rents as well. I know this isn't standard practice with the county, but the reason we've done this is basically because while there's only 6% roughly of the property right now vacant, 29% is slated to turn over by the end of this year, all in the second half. So if somewhere in between that and the 6% does in fact occur, and it is expected to for some tenants, then we think it's a reasonable assumption that the other income, being the reimbursements, would also lose 16% of their cash flow. So once we apply the 16%, we take the standard 20% or 27% rather that's used by the county, and then apply the 2% reserve allocation. That's what we've seen done in the past for this property by the owners. And then finally, we use an increased cap rate with a base rate of 7%. If you turn to page 6 of 34 in our analysis, you'll see a standard template that we've drawn up, which references 3 major studies: the ACLI fourth quarter 2021 study, the RERC retail study from fourth quarter 2021, and the PwC Corpaz investor survey from fourth quarter 2021. And when averaging many of these numbers, we think a base rate of 7% is a lot more appropriate for this property. So just ask that you consider the increased upcoming vacancy expected of the property, and that there will be an overall, a prospective buyer as of January 1st would likely bake in that risk by increasing the cap rate. That's pretty much the crux of our argument, pretty straightforward, and I'll let Ms. Roskin take it from here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Roskin for the county.
Thank you, board members. Okay, I just want to clear up really quick the gray shaded areas first, because I think Jose was confused in the last case and I couldn't say anything at the time. The 16% shaded base, 16% of the vacancy is taken from the base rent. It is not taken from the GPI, which includes pass-through. And the same thing goes for the expenses. When we developed the guidelines this year for the expenses and vacancy, we excluded the pass-throughs, the other and miscellaneous calculations in there. So if you get confused, an easy way to check is to go back to let's see, page 5, which is the worksheet, and you'll see where 16% of vacancy is taken only from the base rent, and then you calculate your expenses from that number, and we do not include the pass-through. Okay, enough said about that. For this particular property, we did recognize that the physical vacancy right now is only 6.2%, and we used a stabilized vacancy rate of 16% of the base rent. And when you take a look at our expenses, they're pretty much in line with the 2021 operating year. If you take a look at our historically, the NOI, all right, let me rephrase that. If you take a look at column D, the original January 1 assessment, and look at the NOI from that column and compare it historically to columns A, B, C, and E, it's still below what they're reporting. And that's pretty much what I have for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? No? Mr. Lawson, I can't see you. Do you have a question?
Yeah, Mary, I've got a quick question. This is
Okay.
Barnes.
Go ahead, Mr. Lawson.
This is for the county. The applicant is proposing a reserve allocation, and we don't typically allow that for this type of a property. Is that correct?
That is correct. I believe the only one that we allow that for in the county are hotel.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay. You both did a fine job there. Okay, Ms. Ruskin, if you take 1 minute to wrap up, please.
Sure, I'll just reiterate what was just said about the reserve allocation expense. We do not consider that for this particular property type. And I just wanted to reiterate that our NOI in our original assessment is lower than anything that's being reported here historically for 2018 through 2021. And just to recap that the gray shaded areas, the stabilized vacancy, 16% is taken only from the base rent. And the same thing with the expenses is taken only from the base rent. It is not developed off of the GPI. And we just request that you give serious consideration to column D, the original assessment of $6,671,100. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Coet, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yeah, so again, we don't think the county's analysis is really all that unreasonable here, and do appreciate Ms. Raskin looking at everything the way she has. Just the main point of our argument, which drives the two major appeal arguments, the reserve allocation, frankly, we could forget about. It's not crucial. We think just looking forward, obviously the occupancy has been good here in the past. So yes, the county's NOI is lower than or in line with a lot of historic, year-end NOI figures. But that being said, there is probably going to be a drop-off this year because there are, almost 30% of the tenants here slated to have their lease expire. There will probably be the ones that do re-sign, that we don't know what the structures of those new leases or extensions are going to look like. What we've seen is a lot of the reimbursements have gone down for in a lot of other retail tenants in Arlington and DC for re-upping. And we also just asked that you consider the cap rate here, 7.3 or 6.15 base, seems a bit low. Just given that it's not metro accessible even remotely. It's not an ideal location in Arlington. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. It's just among the board members. What's everybody think? Mr. Hoffman.
It's, historically very stable shopping center, well located, pretty low valuation as far as any potential future use. I think the center next door sold for like $7 million. So I think the county's pretty much spot on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mr. Matzkin, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. I just don't agree with the appellant's discussion that things might go south in the second half of this calendar year. If they do, we'll see about it next assessment period. I also don't agree with including pass-through income as a base for deductions of all kinds. And finally, the cap rate, to echo Craig, this really is very well located. The Columbia Pike redevelopment project did very good things for these folks and has made it or assured that it stays stable. So I'm in full agreement with the county's assessment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody different?
Nope.
No. All right. Would somebody like to make a motion? Mr. Hoffman.
Sure, I'll motion to confirm the county's assessment at $6,671,100.
Okay. And Mr. Matzkin is a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Okay. It's unanimous. The county's confirmed at $6,671,100.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. That concludes business for today. Does anybody have any other business before I finish up here?
Hey, Mary.
Yep. Welcome back.
How you doing? I just want to let everybody know that I am back.
Okay. Well, welcome back. The new grand poobah and father.
All of it.
Yeah. There you go.
Also, I spoke with Rosie yesterday. She was sending information out on payments to the board about setting up direct deposit for that.
Yep, that was on my little list here to talk about. Yeah. Okay. You got anything else? Yep. Okay. All right. So that was just the last final thing. Rosa sent out stuff. I think 2 people have let her know. You just need to let her know yes or no if you want the direct deposit. I mean, obviously it's a lot quicker and it's, easier. You don't have to rely on the mail service to get it, and it's cheaper for the county. We love saving money because then they can further pass that along in a tax reduction to its citizens. So anyway, so
recording. Do you want me to stop the recording?
Yeah, you can stop the recording.